Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. Now, the South African Human Rights Commission has warned that Eskom's proposed tariff hikes may lead to a potential of social unrest. Now, the utility has asked the energy regulator, NERSA, for a 36% tariff increase for the next year, which has sparked public outrage. Now, NERSA recently granted Eskom's application to retrospectively recover 8 billion rand for the 2021-22 financial year. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome Human Rights Commissioner Sandra Makoasha, who joins us via Zoom from Polokwane. Commissioner Sandra, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Thank you so much for welcoming me.
Yeah. It's an absolute pleasure. I think, Sandra, when people talk of social unrest, I think the first thing that comes to mind is probably what happened in 2021. Everyone would like to think that won't be the case. But we look now, the economy is growing, yes, but there seems to be still many households who are really struggling. And I think that's the crux of this conversation, isn't it? The fact that nobody wants to be in a position where they're choosing between paying high tariffs for electricity and putting food on the table.
I think that's what's happening. South Africans are currently living in a very difficult economic situation. And the concern is that, yes, they do not want to choose between, having electricity and putting food on the table. But we note that, yes, the economy has been growing, but there are other concerns such as service delivery, which also includes the provision of electricity in terms of the South African, provision that certain households are entitled to a certain percentage of free electricity. And we're seeing that that's not being reflective in what we have noticed as the South African Human Rights Commission. There is that gap, and we hope, and we're having conversations around that we understand that, yes, the Constitution does not guarantee electricity as a human right, but it does affect other rights such as the right to healthcare, food, dignity, as well as other aspects of human rights lives. Thank you.
Commissioner, 2 weeks ago, I had a representative of NERSA, and one of the discussions that came up is, of course, public consultation. Now, the public would say, look, we don't want there to be any hikes to the electricity because we can't afford it. How important is something like public consultation, even though, the opposing side knows exactly what the answer is going to be, and that answer is going to be, well, we don't want you to hike it. But in a constitution, in a democratic a country like ours, public consultation, is that necessary?
I think public consultation is the conversation we need about what the constitutional democracy means. Yes, the answer may be no, that we don't want the price hike, but they will explain the rationale behind the no. You may be able to interact with community members, and those on the ground will explain the rationale behind the no. But often in some cases, when you have these dialogues, you are able for parties to meet each other halfway. And that's the whole point of consultation, so that we understand what society really needs on the ground. Without this consultation, you often have a process that is divorced of the reality that's happening in South Africa.
Commissioner, what has the South African Human Rights done in terms of saying, right, let's sit on the table? Because, we keep hearing of this public dialogue, a national dialogue, actually, to put it like that. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to the Public Service Commission, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, and he said that, look, there has to be a supposed public dialogue or national dialogue, because stuff like this, for example, does hit the pocket of the consumer, especially when we're having, quite high unemployment rates. Talk to us about that, and is there a way, maybe as a Chapter 9 institution, that the South African Human Rights Commission wants to say, let's sit with government, let's sit with NERSA, let's sit with Eskom, let's sit with all the other stakeholders, and find a way, a middle ground where, of course, Eskom can get its revenue, which, as an SOE, it will say it needs, but on the other side, the consumer who really wants to have more money in their pocket to enjoy the freedoms as we enjoy as South Africans?
what the South African Human Rights Commission has done, we have made written submissions to the energy regulator about our position about the price hike, and we had, in conclusion, we hope that when they are, interrogating the issue of the price hike that Eskom has requested, taking into account a balancing exercise between Eskom's request as well as what is happening in terms of the socio-economic landscape of South Africa. The price hike does not only affect the purse of the poor, but it also affects our middle class. And often in those instances, how do we then look into it? You will note that South Africans are also having conversations about the high tariffs regarding transportation and its accessibility. At the current state, South Africans are very frustrated and do not trust government to then fulfill their interests and put them forward. So when you have these open dialogues with members of society on the ground, you then allow them to be part of that process and own that process. So what we as the South African Human Rights Commission have done, as you'll note, our chairperson was engaging with a community that was very frustrated by this process, and we are then as part of our organizing pillars for this year, also as part of called rapid response, we are engaging with communities about how do we then offer solutions to them, but also have solutions that they are involved in, and we offer this to government as part of our intervention as a Chapter 9 institution.
One of the universal rights that every citizen in the world needs is, of course, water, and we're seeing now that there are water cuts happening. I mean, in Gauteng, I think there's the level 1 water cut where rainwater is asking some of the residents to not do certain things. So it's not at a crisis level, but some there's talks on the street that this could lead to further cuts within water. So you could understand the frustration of citizens. Am I right in saying that, Commissioner? Because a lot of them are saying, well, I mean, we're paying high tariffs for electricity, we're paying high rates and taxes in whichever municipality, and yet the service is not there. It comes down to service delivery. Service delivery still seems to be that low-hanging fruit that 30 years on from democracy still seems to be there and frustrating many of the citizens of the country.
And that is correct. South Africans, especially at local government level, believe that government has not been doing enough in terms of service delivery, especially in terms of water, sanitation, as well as electricity. And that is the concern that we're facing. You'll note that I think this week, residents of Seshego took up in arms regarding how the municipality was actually charging them. So there seems to be that mistrust between citizens on the ground as well as what is happening within local government. The South African Human Rights Commission, led by Commissioner Boshoff, has started the Water Justice Project, which will then also, in the long term, give us data that we can actually provide to government. We are also, deliberating in respect of really, is there load shedding, or is it, the certain places and communities that are facing load reduction, and we are having those conversations, and we hope that when we do meet with Eskom and the relevant stakeholders, when we have these conversations, we can actually have a progressive realization to ensure that South Africans' socio-economic rights are met and not further, not observed, but further violated. We note the economic situation in South Africa, but we're trying to find a balancing exercise between what government needs, what local government is saying to the South African Human Rights Commission, but also we are trying to ensure that the public is fully aware about what is happening and are part of the process. And I think that's the important part, where South Africans feel that they're not part of the process, but they are told that this is what's going to happen, and they simply need to accept what is happening without being part of the consultation process. And that's not what democracy is about.
Yeah, and I think, to touch on what you're saying, Commissioner, I mean, this is probably where the outrage is coming. Citizens are saying, well, you're not really communicating with us. We're getting told what to do, like a school teacher telling a pupil in the classroom. And they don't want that, because when the citizens would say, well, we voted for whoever is in government, and currently right now we have this government of national unity. And that brings the next question with regards to the potential of this social unrest which could occur. One would like to think it would be marches, peaceful marches, which would be, either going to Eskom or to NERSA or to Treasury or to, any relevant department, which is, where the center of the problem is. And everyone has the right to do that, don't they? The question is, is government really willing to listen with regards to that, because at the end of the day, government to a certain extent feels that, hey, we're telling you what to do because we're the ones in charge of distributing legislations.
Well, I think that's where South Africans believe that, this new system of government of national unity, would allow them to be part of that process. We have not yet seen how it would look for the average South African in respect of the government of national unity. Yes, South Africans will say that we have voted, but I think that voting is one part of the democratic process, but it's the whole process of South Africans owning or being part of that process. And that's important. And they feel that, what councillors, local government, MECs, as well as the premiers are not really understanding what they find themselves in. They often like to say that the policies that government puts in place is far removed from what is happening on the ground, because the legislature and those who are in government are far removed from the people. And I think this is a great opportunity for South Africans to also be part of the process by writing and making written submissions to government. And we do hope for a peaceful time when we're talking about social unrest, that South Africans participate in dialogues that are encouraging, that would also then, they have written submissions to Eskom and the relevant stakeholders, perhaps in some cases, utilize court processes to ensure that their rights are not only protected but adhered to by government.
Commissioner Sandra, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, to inviting me to the show.
Absolute pleasure. That's South African Human Rights Commissioner Sandra Makoasha joining us via Zoom from Polokwane in the Limpopo province. And interesting times how this is going to happen. But South Africa's pockets are not as full as we would think it is, especially so many. I mean, we're moving closer to that 40% mark of unemployment. And now they have to shelve up even more money for electricity. You may feel the anger of the citizens, because it is really a testing time from an economic perspective. After the break, I'm going to be speaking to Karam Singh from the Corruption Watch. Yesterday, the former CFO of Steinhoff was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now we're asking, does the crime or the punishment fit the crime? We're going to be having that discussion after this break.